Rain hammered against the diner windows that night, each drop glinting beneath the flickering neon sign that read Marty's Diner, open all night. The clock ticked past midnight, and the small town of Redwood Falls seemed to hold its breath. A distant rumble of engines echoed through the empty streets, low, heavy, and unrelenting. People inside glanced toward the window, their faces tightening. They all knew that sound. It was the Black Ravens, a biker gang that rolled through town whenever the night felt too quiet. To most, their presence meant trouble, but tonight, fate had something different planned. As the doors swung open, the air changed. Rain-soaked leather jackets, steel-toed boots, and the faint scent of gasoline filled the diner. At the front of the group walked Jack Malone, known to every whisper in town as Ironheart, a man feared for his fists but respected for his silence. He didn't speak much, but when he did, the room listened. No one noticed the small details that caught his eye until he saw her. Behind the counter, wiping a coffee mug with trembling hands, stood Emily. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were distant, and the sleeve of her uniform failed to hide the faint purple bruise near her wrist. She moved quietly, too quietly, as if afraid that sound itself might betray her. Jack's gaze hardened. For a man who had seen too much pain in his lifetime, that small mark told a story louder than words. And from that instant, he knew something was terribly wrong. What would you do if you saw someone silently crying for help? Would you look away, pretending it wasn't your business? Or would you risk everything to protect a stranger? Hold that thought, because this story will make you question what true courage really means. Hey there, welcome to Swift Tale, where every story reminds you that even the toughest hearts can carry the gentlest souls. If you're visiting for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because here we bring you stories that touch your heart, challenge your beliefs, and make you believe in humanity again. Today's tale is one that shook an entire town, a story of violence, redemption, and unexpected kindness. It begins in a forgotten diner on a stormy night, when a biker gang leader noticed something no one else dared to see. This isn't just a story about bruises on skin, it's about the bruises we carry inside, and the courage it takes to heal them. It's about a man who thought he'd lost his soul finding it again in the most unlikely place. By the time this story ends, you'll see how one act of compassion can ripple through a community and change lives forever. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear badges or capes, they ride Harley-Davidsons through the rain. So settle in, grab a warm drink, and listen closely. In the next few moments, we'll travel into a world where darkness meets redemption, where strength is measured not by fists, but by the will to do what's right. This is the story of Jack Ironheart, Malone, and Emily, the waitress whose silent pain changed his life, and the night that made an entire town question everything it thought it knew about monsters and men. Welcome to Swift Tale, where every heartbeat tells a story. Let's begin. Redwood Falls wasn't the kind of town you'd find on a map anymore. It used to be a quiet, working-class place, surrounded by rolling hills and rusted factories, but time had worn it down like old paint on a forgotten wall. The streets were lined with shuttered stores, half-broken streetlights, and memories that no one dared to talk about. People didn't smile much here. They just survived from one paycheck to the next, pretending the silence wasn't heavy. If you looked closely, though, you could feel it, an undercurrent of secrets, fear, and resignation running beneath every porch light that flickered at night. At the heart of this weary town stood Marty's Diner, the last place open after dark, a small haven where truckers, factory workers, and lost souls gathered. It smelled of burnt coffee, fried bacon, and stories too sad to tell. Every corner had seen tears, laughter, and confessions no priest ever heard. And behind the counter, always wearing the same pale blue uniform, was Emily Turner, a waitress in her late 20s who had learned the art of smiling through pain. She was kind, gentle, and always ready with a refill, but her eyes told a different story. They had that faraway look, like she was somewhere else entirely, someplace safer. The townsfolk noticed the change in her over the past year. The quietness, the long sleeves even in summer, the way she flinched when someone raised their voice. People whispered when she wasn't listening. "She's with that deputy, isn't she?" Someone would murmur. "Yeah, Kyle heard he's got a temper." But that was as far as it ever went, whispers. No one ever asked her if she was okay, because in Redwood Falls, people had learned to mind their own business. When you spoke up, trouble came knocking. And everyone had enough trouble of their own. The diner's neon sign glowed faintly against the wet pavement, casting red light through the rain-streaked windows. That was where Jack Malone and his gang often stopped on their late-night rides. The townspeople didn't like it. They said the Black Ravens were bad news, rough men with roaring engines and cold stares, but in truth, they rarely caused trouble. They came, ate quietly, tipped generously, and left as fast as they came. Still, fear has a way of coloring everything dark. To the people of Redwood Falls, bikers meant danger. They never guessed that one of them would soon become the town's unlikely protector. Jack, or Ironheart as his brothers called him, wasn't born cruel. The scars on his face and the ink on his skin told stories of battles fought, both on the streets and inside his own soul. He had a presence that could silence a room, tall, broad-shouldered, and weathered by years of hard living. But those who looked past the roughness sometimes caught something else in his eyes, a flicker of conscience, a sense of loss he carried like a chain around his neck. The kind of man who'd been through hell and didn't want to see anyone else burn. When Jack and his men rolled into town that rainy night, no one paid much attention. They parked their bikes outside the diner, engines idling like growling beasts in the storm. Inside, the chatter died instantly. It was always like that. The regulars lowered their voices. Marty, the owner, pretended to be busy wiping a counter that was already spotless. And Emily, she just kept her head down, as if hoping to disappear. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Jack noticed her the moment he stepped inside, not because of beauty, though she had that quiet kind, but because of the way she avoided eye contact, the tremor in her hands, the small wince when the coffee pot brushed her wrist. It was subtle. But Jack had seen enough pain to recognize it anywhere. Something inside him tightened. His instincts, the same ones that once kept him alive in street fights and brawls, now whispered something different. She's in trouble. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, echoing through the valley like an omen. Inside, the light flickered for a second, casting everyone's face in brief shadow. And in that instant, Jack's eyes caught the faint outline of bruises beneath Emily's sleeve. Not just one, several, old and new. He said nothing, but his jaw clenched. His men noticed too, but no one dared to speak. They knew that look on their leader's face. It was the same one he had before every storm. The rest of the night passed in uneasy quiet. Jack finished his coffee but didn't touch his food. Emily moved carefully, her smile polite but distant. When she brought the check, her voice trembled. "Thanks for coming in," she said softly, her eyes flicking toward the door, as if afraid someone might walk through it at any second. Jack nodded slowly, leaving a 50 on the table for a $5 meal. She looked startled but said nothing. He gave her one last look, steady, kind, protective, before stepping out into the rain. As the sound of engines faded into the distance, Emily stood by the window, staring after them, her reflection trembling against the glass. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe, because for reasons she couldn't explain, when that man looked at her, she didn't feel invisible anymore. She felt seen, and that was something she hadn't felt in a very long time. But Redwood Falls wasn't done keeping its secrets. The next morning, as the sun broke through heavy clouds, a police cruiser sat parked outside Emily's small apartment. Inside, a man in uniform with cold blue eyes waited by the door. Deputy Kyle Harris, her boyfriend. The town saw his badge and called him a hero. Emily saw his hands and called them pain. The bruise on her wrist was just the beginning. And somewhere miles away, on the open road, Jack Malone couldn't shake the image of those bruises from his mind. He didn't know it yet, but the path he was on would soon collide with hers, and when it did, it would set off a chain of events that would tear the town's silence wide open. Because sometimes, the people we fear most are the ones who save us. And sometimes, the quietest cries for help are the ones that change everything. Jack Malone had a reputation that traveled faster than his motorcycle. To most people, he was the man mothers warned their sons about, the kind of man who rode through town in black leather, left the air heavy with exhaust, and never smiled. But to those who really knew him, Jack wasn't just a biker, he was a man running from ghosts that refused to die. He had grown up on the wrong side of the tracks, in a neighborhood where broken bottles sparkled brighter than dreams. His father was a steelworker who drank too much and fought too often. His mother left when he was 12, leaving behind nothing but a faded photograph and a smell of cheap perfume that haunted him for years. By 16, Jack had already seen more violence than most men see in a lifetime. But he had one rule: one that stayed with him even when the world tried to break it out of him, never hurt the innocent. He earned the nickname Ironheart after a bar fight years ago, not because he was cold, but because he survived wounds that should have killed him. The bullet lodged near his heart was a souvenir from a night gone wrong, a reminder that he'd once tried to do the right thing and paid dearly for it. His brothers in the Black Ravens joked that he was half man, half machine, but the truth was, Jack's heart hadn't turned to iron. It was just hidden behind layers of guilt, loss, and silence. To his gang, Jack wasn't just a leader, he was a father figure. He took in men who had nowhere else to go, ex-cons, drifters, and outcasts who'd been chewed up and spit out by society. The Ravens were more than a gang. They were a family stitched together by broken souls. Under Jack's rule, they didn't deal drugs, didn't harm civilians, and didn't pick fights they couldn't justify. His word was law, and his eyes carried the kind of quiet authority that made men straighten their backs. He wasn't perfect, far from it, but he was fair, and in their world that was rare. Yet behind every man who seems invincible lies a story of heartbreak. Jack came in the form of his younger sister, Lena. She was the only light in his life growing up, soft-spoken, artistic, and full of hope. He had promised to protect her no matter what. But when he was 23, working nights and running with the Ravens, a man she trusted destroyed her world. The system failed her, the town looked away, and by the time Jack found out, it was too late. Lena took her own life, leaving behind a note that said only one thing: "You always kept me safe, until now." That note became the fire that burned behind Jack's eyes. From that day on, he made a silent vow: no woman under his watch would ever suffer the way his sister did. Every time he saw someone hurt or mistreated, that wound reopened. It wasn't just empathy, it was guilt, transformed into a need to make things right. And so, when he saw the bruises on Emily's wrist, it wasn't just another stranger's pain. It was Lena's all over again. That night after leaving the diner, Jack didn't ride home immediately. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt heavy. He pulled over by the old bridge that overlooked the river, took off his helmet, and stared into the dark water. His reflection stared back, older, colder, but still alive. He thought about the way Emily's eyes darted toward the door, the way she flinched when someone laughed too loud. His gut twisted. He'd seen that fear before, in his sister, in others, and once in himself. The hardest part about being strong, he thought, is watching others break. Back at their hideout, an abandoned warehouse turned clubhouse, the Ravens gathered around a crackling fire. Laughter echoed, beer bottles clinked, but Jack sat apart, lost in thought. His right-hand man, Toby, noticed. "You've got that look again," he said, sitting beside him, "the one that means someone's about to regret breathing wrong." Jack smirked faintly but didn't answer. Toby nudged him. "Is this about that waitress at Marty?" Jack turned, eyes sharp. "You noticed too?" "Yeah," Toby said, nodding. "We all did, but you saw more than the rest of us." Jack exhaled slowly. "She's hiding something. Someone's hurting her." Toby leaned back. "So what's the play, boss? We don't even know who she's with." Jack's eyes darkened. "Not yet." The room went quiet. They all knew what that tone meant. Jack wasn't the kind of man who picked random fights, not anymore, but when he decided to step in, he didn't stop until things were right. To the Ravens. This wasn't just about Emily, it was about their leader's code. They had all been broken once. That was why they followed him. Jack stood, walking toward the row of motorcycles gleaming under the dim lights. "Get some sleep," he muttered. "Tomorrow we ride early." Toby frowned. "Where to?" Jack slipped his leather gloves on, his voice low and steady. "Back to town." Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and gasoline. Jack started his bike, the engine roaring like thunder. For a brief second, he closed his eyes, and the image of Lena's smiling face flashed before him. "Maybe I couldn't save you," he thought, "but maybe I can save her." As he sped down the empty highway toward Redwood Falls, dawn began to break across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and gray. The road stretched endlessly before him, a ribbon of redemption leading back to a diner where fate waited in silence. Because Jack, Ironheart, Malone didn't believe in second chances for himself. But he'd give one to anyone who needed it. The rain had returned by the time Jack rode back into Redwood Falls. It came down in sharp silver sheets, drenching the cracked pavement and whispering through the power lines like a restless spirit. The morning crowd had gone, leaving the streets empty, except for a few cars crawling through puddles. Jack's motorcycle glided through the storm, the engine's growl blending with thunder, until he came to a stop outside Marty's diner, the same place where he'd first seen her. The neon sign flickered weakly, half the letters burned out now so that it only read Artie's inside. The soft hum of a jukebox filled the air with a lonely tune, an old country song about broken dreams. Jack pushed the door open, and the familiar bell above it chimed weakly. The warmth of the diner met the cold of the storm, fogging up the glass. Emily was there, just as he expected, refilling coffee cups for the early lunch crowd. She looked up for only a second, her face softening in surprise before she quickly looked away. He sat down at the same booth, the one by the window, where the rain tapped steadily against the glass. "Coffee," he said simply when she approached, his voice deep and steady. Emily nodded, avoiding his eyes. Jack noticed the faint cut on her lip this time, and something inside him burned. The bruise on her wrist hadn't faded. If anything, it looked worse. She tried to keep it covered, but the sleeve slipped slightly as she set down his cup. Her hand trembled, spilling a few drops on the table. "Sorry," she murmured quickly. "No harm done," Jack said softly. His tone wasn't harsh. It carried a weight that made her glance up for the first time. Their eyes met. Hers were a mixture of fear and exhaustion, but deep inside there was something else, a silent plea. Jack leaned back, studying her. "Rough morning." She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Just another day." He didn't believe that. He'd heard that same answer from too many people, hiding bruises behind polite words. He wanted to ask who did this to her, wanted to storm out and find the man responsible, but he knew fear too well to push her. Instead, he offered something safer. "You live around here?" Emily hesitated again. "Yeah, near the station." Jack's jaw tightened. "The police station?" She nodded. "My boyfriend works there." The words hit him like a silent gunshot. So that was it. The law. The very people meant to protect her were the reason she couldn't escape. He looked down at his coffee, the steam swirling like smoke from a fire he couldn't put out. "You happy?" he asked quietly. Her lips parted as if to answer, but no words came. Then, with a forced smile, she said, "Yeah, I'm fine." But the way her voice cracked betrayed her. Before Jack could say another word, the diner door burst open. A gust of rain swept in, along with a man in a deputy's uniform. He was tall, clean-cut, with sharp features and eyes too cold for his fake smile. His name tag read K. Harris, Kyle. He said, his tone falsely sweet. "I've been calling you, didn't pick up." Emily froze, gripping the coffee pot tighter. "Sorry," she whispered, "my phone's in the back." Kyle's smile faded slightly as his eyes flicked to Jack. "Everything okay here?" Jack didn't move. He just met Kyle's gaze, unflinching. "Coffee's good." Kyle studied him for a second, then smirked. "Glad to hear it. Don't cause any trouble, all right." Jack didn't reply. He didn't need to. The tension between them was thick enough to cut. Kyle turned his attention back to Emily, his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. She flinched, just barely, but Jack saw it. And so did Toby, who had just walked in with two other ravens. They froze, exchanging looks. Jack's voice was calm when he spoke, but his eyes were fire. "She looks scared," he said quietly. Kyle's grin widened. "You got a problem, biker?" Jack's hands curled into fists under the table. He could feel every instinct screaming to get up, but he forced himself to stay seated. "Not yet," he said evenly, "but you keep your hands where I can see them." For a split second, the room went silent. The regulars at the counter turned away, pretending not to see. Marty ducked into the kitchen. Emily's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Kyle chuckled darkly, tapping his badge. "Careful who you talk to, tough guy. This town doesn't like your kind." Jack's lips curved slightly. "This town doesn't like a lot of things, doesn't mean they're right." Kyle sneered, then leaned in close to Emily. "Let's go." She hesitated, looking helplessly at Jack, as if begging him to stay silent. Jack gave her a small nod, the kind that said, "I see you, you're not alone." She turned away, following Kyle out into the rain, her shoulders trembling. The bell above the door jingled one last time before silence filled the diner again. Jack sat there for a long moment, his jaw tight, staring at the door. His coffee had gone cold. Toby slid into the booth across from him. "So," he said quietly, "we doing something about that?" Jack didn't answer right away. He watched the rain sliding down the window, tracing paths like tears. "Yeah," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "We are doing something." Outside, Kyle's police cruiser pulled away from the diner, its red taillights fading into the mist. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She didn't know what scared her more, the man driving beside her or the thought that the stranger she just met might actually come back for her. Inside the diner, Jack finished his coffee, stood, and dropped a few bills on the table. As he stepped into the storm, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the long stretch of road ahead. His leather jacket glistened with rain, his eyes dark and determined. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just another stop on a lonely ride. This was the beginning of something bigger, a storm that would shake the entire town to its core. The rain had washed the streets clean by morning, but in Redwood Falls, nothing ever truly got washed away. Secrets only sank deeper. The diner sat quiet in the early light, the neon sign buzzing faintly, while across town, Jack Malone's engine roared down the empty road. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night thinking about that moment, the way Emily flinched when Kyle touched her, the way she looked at him, as if she wanted to scream but couldn't. That look haunted him. He'd seen it once before, in his sister Lena's eyes, right before she broke. By the time the sun rose, Jack had already made up his mind. He wasn't walking away this time. He'd been doing that for too long, watching the world hurt the helpless while good men stayed silent. Not anymore. He pulled up near the diner just as Emily was unlocking the door for the morning shift. The sky was pale gray, and her hands trembled as she tried to fit the key into the lock. When she heard the familiar rumble of his motorcycle, she froze. For a second, fear crossed her face, then confusion. Jack dismounted slowly, removing his helmet, the cool air curling around his breath. "Didn't mean to startle you," he said, his tone calm but steady. Emily shook her head quickly. "You didn't. I didn't expect to see you again." He leaned against his bike, studying her. "Didn't expect to come back, but I couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right." Emily looked away, hugging herself as if she were cold. "You shouldn't get involved," she whispered. "People around here, they don't like trouble." Jack gave a dry chuckle. "Lady, I am trouble, but I don't like seeing good people hurt." Her eyes darted toward the road, scanning, searching, as if afraid someone might see them talking. "You don't understand," she said softly. "He's not just anyone, he's the law here. If you go against him, he'll make you disappear." Jack's voice lowered. "He already made you disappear, didn't he?" The words hit her like a wave. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her eyes filled with tears she didn't bother to hide. "He wasn't always like this," she said. "When we first met, he was kind, charming. Everyone said I was lucky, but then he changed." Jack stayed silent, letting her speak. "He'd get angry over small things, if I was late home, if someone looked at me too long, if I smiled at a customer. At first, he'd just yell. Then he started hitting, always where people couldn't see. And when I tried to leave," her voice cracked. "He said no one would believe me, that he'd tell everyone I was crazy, and in this town, a cop's word means everything." Jack's jaw tightened. "You ever report him?" She laughed bitterly through her tears. "To who? His friends, his chief. They all play cards together every Friday night." Silence hung heavy between them. The truth of it was uglier than Jack imagined, but not unfamiliar. Corruption ran deep in towns like this, small places where everyone knew everyone and no one dared to speak against power. Jack exhaled slowly, trying to steady the anger building in his chest. "You got anyone else? Family? Friends?" Emily shook her head. "Just my mom, but she's in a nursing home out of town. I send her what I can." Jack nodded, his eyes softening. "Then you've got us now." She frowned. "Us?" "The Ravens," he said simply. "We look out for our own, whether you wear leather or an apron." Emily stared at him, disbelief mixing with something else, hope. It had been so long since anyone offered her protection without wanting something in return. "But why?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Jack's gaze hardened, memories flashing behind his eyes. "Because once I knew someone like you, and I wasn't there when she needed me." He turned away, pulling his helmet back on. "Be at the diner tomorrow morning. Don't miss work. He'll show up again, they always do, and when he does, I'll be watching." Before she could say anything, he started his bike and rode off, leaving behind the faint scent of rain and gasoline. Emily stood there for a long time, her heart pounding, not knowing if she should be terrified or grateful. That night, true to Jack's word, the Ravens began to dig. Toby hacked into local reports. Another member, Lex, talked to a few people downtown. It didn't take long to find the truth. Deputy Kyle Harris had a history. 2 complaints filed against him for excessive force, both dismissed. A bar fight that mysteriously disappeared from record. A woman who left town years ago, rumored to have been his problem. Jack stared at the printed files spread across the table in their clubhouse, his fists tightening with every word. "He's been hiding behind that badge for years," Toby muttered. "Guy thinks he's untouchable." Jack's eyes burned. Not anymore. The next evening, when Emily returned home, she noticed something strange, a small black raven feather tucked under her door. She froze, staring at it, her heart racing. For a second, she didn't know what it meant. Then she realized it was a message. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone was watching over her. Across town, Jack sat on his bike outside the police station, the glow of his cigarette flickering in the dark. Through the glass doors, he could see Kyle laughing with another officer, his arrogance on full display. Jack's jaw flexed as he watched. He didn't believe in heroes, not anymore, but he did believe in balance. And it was time this town remembered what justice looked like. For years, Jack had buried his anger beneath silence and smoke. But tonight, as he watched a monster in uniform joke about weekend plans, he made a promise to himself. He'd bring him down, even if it meant breaking every rule in the book. Because sometimes, the only way to fight the devil is to walk through the fire yourself. The night had teeth. A storm brewed over Redwood Falls, rumbling like the growl of something ancient. In the dimly lit clubhouse on the edge of town, Jack Malone and his crew, the Ravens, gathered around a wooden table scarred by time and battle. A single light swung overhead, casting long, restless shadows across their faces. Cigarette smoke hung thick in the air, mingling with the tension. Jack stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, his leather jacket glistening faintly under the light. He looked at each of his men, Toby, Lex, Diesel, and Rafe, his most loyal brothers. They weren't saints. They weren't heroes. But every one of them had crawled through their own kind of hell, and they knew what it meant to stand up for someone who couldn't fight back. Toby clicked open his laptop, spinning it toward Jack. "I found him," he said. "Deputy Kyle Harris, 36 years old, works the night shift, spends most evenings at the Rusty Nail after duty. He's got a cabin on the outskirts of town, near the old mill road." Jack's jaw tightened. "That's where he takes her when he wants to keep her quiet, isn't it?" Toby nodded grimly. "Most likely, she's not the first." Lex leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "So what's the plan, boss? We just roll up and scare him straight?" Jack shook his head slowly. "No, we do this smart. No noise, no blood unless it's the last resort." He glanced toward the door, where rain tapped against the windows like restless fingers. "Emily deserves her life back, not another mess to clean." Diesel snorted, his voice gravelly. "You think the law's gonna do anything? The guy is the law." Jack met his gaze. "Then we make our own." The room fell silent. Outside, thunder cracked like a warning. Rafe spoke up, voice calm but steady. "You sure you want to go down this road again, Jack? You know how it ended last time." Jack's eyes flickered with pain. A memory, his sister's face, pale and bruised, flashed before him. "Yeah," he said finally, "that's why I have to." They all nodded. No one argued after that. The Ravens spent the next few hours drawing out a plan. Toby hacked into the police patrol logs, marking Kyle's usual routes. Lex and Diesel prepared the bikes, mufflers wrapped in cloth, to keep them quiet. Rafe checked the old warehouse on the south end, turning it into a safe place for Emily if things went wrong. It wasn't just a rescue mission, it was justice, the kind that didn't wear a badge. Meanwhile, across town, Emily stood behind the diner's counter, pretending to wipe glasses, but her hands trembled. Every time the door opened, her heart skipped, terrified it would be him. The bruise on her wrist had darkened overnight, a cruel reminder of the last time Kyle lost his temper. She hadn't heard from Jack since yesterday, but somehow she felt him watching, protecting. When her shift ended, she walked home under her umbrella, the rain whispering secrets to the streetlights. But tonight, she wasn't alone. Hidden in the shadows of the alley, a motorcycle engine purred softly. Jack watched her from a distance, making sure she got home safe. Toby's voice came through his earpiece. "She's inside. Lights are off." Jack exhaled.